Osu belongs to a genre of game called rhythm. Gameplay is based around the beat of a song, and points are awarded according to how accurately you can perform the chart set to the song. But a lot of the community argues against this, citing one simple reason: aim. There is a physical aspect of moving a cursor over a hit object before you can click it, and if your cursor isn't over the object, no matter how close to the rhythm you tap, it counts for nothing. In that sense, gameplay doesn't just revolve around playing accurately to a song, it also involves a test of how good your hand-eye coordination is. So can Osu really be called a rhythm game when you're able to essentially play glorified whack-a-mole instead? I think so. There are a lot of aspects that aim adds involving rhythm. The best analogy I can think of for this is calling Osu not a music game, but an interpretive dance game. This might sound weird to the casual player, but hear me out. When you play an instrument, you're reproducing the music from a set of written instructions you see on the sheet music in front of you. You can liken this to any traditional VSRG, where the instructions appear at the top of the screen and fall, giving you visual information on what to do and at what time. The more complex music gets, the more instructions you're given and the harder the written music gets to understand and play, which again is a mirror to harder charts, having more notes and more complex patterns to play. But when you learn a dance, you're given a set of instructions that you have to reproduce through body movement. The movements require coordination and control to perform, and have to be performed at the right time to sync up with the music. Liken this to Osu and you can see how the movements, coordination and control translate into aim. Again, the more complex a dance you're performing, the more coordination you need to have, and wide and or varied movements will require more control to translate from one into the next. In Osu terms, the larger or more complex the patterns, the more control and coordination you'll need in your aim to perform it. Bringing this all together, both playing music and dancing to music count as rhythmic activities, so I see no reason that Osu shouldn't count as a rhythm game. It might be very different to traditional definitions, but underneath it all, you're still performing actions to a beat. So let's take a step back and go over it from the start. Aim is defined as the movement of your cursor from one hit circle to the next. There are different types of aim and definitely different methods of aiming, but its core definition remains the same. Good aim is seen as being able to hit highly spaced patterns, and extremely inconsistent movement and cursor placement is seen as bad aim. The two, however, cross over, as you can have good aim because of your ability to look into hitting 7-star jumps, but bad aim because of a lack of control on 5 stars. Which poses the question: how does one get purely good aim? To answer that, we need to take a definition of good aim as standard, but I don't think that's entirely possible, since it means different things to everyone, and I can't actually come up with a quantifiable example of such an abstract general concept. Let's narrow it down a little. There are two widely agreed upon types of aim. The first, referred to as jump aim or snap aim, is the aim method required to move your cursor between single circles of arbitrary spacing. This is done by accelerating your cursor at circle 1 in the direction of circle 2, controlling it in transit so that it doesn't wander off course, and then using a controlled deceleration to stop your cursor on circle 2 so that you can click it. This is the textbook form of raw difficulty. The star difficulty of jump maps almost directly correlates to the spacing used in the patterns. This is potentially the most common type of aim, with high star 1-2 jump maps flooding the ranked section, involving high amounts of jump aim while neglecting the second type of aim almost completely: flow aim. This is a little more difficult to define, but largely boils down to moving your cursor over a string of predictably spaced circles in one motion. The cursor accelerates from the first circle, after which it doesn't undergo controlled deceleration, it simply either changes direction or changes velocity. This is where the name flow aim comes from, since the cursor is said to be flowing through the circles in a fluid motion, instead of snapping to a stop above each circle as is exhibited in jump aim. There is arguably a third type of aim, called technical aim by some. However, I believe this to be a combination of the previous two types because of the big mixture of acceleration, deceleration, controlled motion and velocity changes involved. Knowing what aim is all well and good, you say, but how do I actually get better at it? There should already have been some tips you could glean from just definition alone, since knowing what is half the battle towards learning how. To improve your jump aim, don't just wildly throw your cursor around the screen in the general direction of what you need to hit. The most important part, I think, isn't stopping on the circle, it's how you get to the circle, since if you have full control over the motion you take, it'll be far easier to sense when to decelerate and to physically slow your cursor down when you need to. Relax when you aim, and aim slowly but deliberately. Practice aiming with intent on lower star maps to get a feel for it, and translate that relaxed and controlled feeling onto the harder stuff. Eventually, you'll build usable control and will be able to apply it whenever you need to. For flow aim, you need the same type of deliberate control required from jump aim, but used in a different way. Most streams have a constant spacing, so to aim them, you're required to move your cursor at a constant velocity over the notes whilst tapping accurately. The feeling of a constant motion should be present, and direction changes within the stream need to be made without breaking the flow of your cursor, requiring you to decelerate in one direction and accelerate in another. While aiming jumps can be quite harsh and snappy, this requires you to be as smooth as possible. For both types of aim, reading what you need to do helps considerably with actually doing it. If you can see the pattern and imagine how the correct movement to hit it will feel, you should be able to replicate that imagined motion when you actually go to aim the pattern without much trouble. Oversimplifying is the worst thing you can do. To elaborate, being able to aim the jumps is all well and good. Being able to follow the stream is great, but if you're doing it while skipping out on important parts you might miss and could potentially fail out of the map. Make sure to aim corners in streams without attempting to lazily curve around them. Hit the last note of every jump before the next comma with the map starts. Essentially, make sure you're aiming at every single note. Also, to improve both types of aim, be playing maps involving the aspect you want to improve that are slightly out of reach for you, but still achievable with practice. This will be a common theme and a piece of advice I will loop back to a lot, since it's really how you improve at anything and everything to do with the game. Small steps help divide the gap between Mendez and honesty up into much more manageable sections that you can tackle one by one. And you can take out of reach to mean one of two things: maps barely FCable and maps barely passable. I previously warned against just playing for passes, but in reality I'm warning against playing mindlessly. As long as you're present in the moment and you can see and attempt to correct mistakes, playing for passes is a good way of pushing your high-end mechanics. A lot of players, myself included, spearhead into just one of the two types of aim early on, and as a result neglect the other type and only practice it whenever it crops up in a map they're playing. This leads to many instances where a stream player won't like to play jump maps, or a jump player is not able to stream 222 BPM. Can you be good at both? Of course you can. There's nothing stopping anyone from practicing, since as frustrating as it can be to be lacking in one core area of gameplay, it's still an area and it still needs training like any other. Sure, it'll take a while, and it's far more tedious to improve 2 skills instead of 1, but it opens up a lot of opportunities to play maps you would otherwise glance over as not my type of map. And that's the basics. To conclude, aim is the combination of fine motor control, hand-eye coordination, and rhythm sense. There are arguably 2 types of aim, jump and flow, which when combined and explored fully can produce some very technical maps. And both are very similar in theory, but vastly different when played. Most players are better at one than the other due to their preferences, but you can be good at both. And of course, when you're practicing aim, it might be easier to succumb to frustration, however, you will improve far faster if you can follow these 3 words. Please enjoy game.